Christians say they believe the Bible, and we sometimes we don't even know what's in it. And so we've been teaching through. There's been some awkward sermons, not the sermon, but the content. We remind people when they post that, Jeff didn't preach an awkward sermon, he preached on an awkward passage. I'm not naming any names or pointing at people. No. But in Mark chapter 10, and it's not going to pop up on the screens for you today because HDMI cable seems to be shot. And so if you have a Bible, you have to open that up to Mark chapter 10. Or if you have the YouVersion app, you can actually pop that open and click on it, and the scriptures will be up there. Or you can just listen to me because I'm going to read them anyway, right? So, you choose. Mark chapter 10, starting verse 46, it says, "And they came to Jericho," and that's Jesus and his disciples, his posse. They're moving along. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And Jericho is it's about 15 miles from Jerusalem. Probably most of us don't know Jericho that much. It's actually kind of the oldest continually inhabited city on earth. So for about 9,000 BC, there's been a city there. I like archaeology and history and stuff. So to me, that's really kind of this interesting, which has nothing to do with the sermon, but kind of interesting. And so it says there's a great crowd. And everywhere Jesus went, he drew a great crowd. People loved the things he was doing, and there was also people who hated the things he was doing. But either way, it wasn't Jesus wandering around lonely without anything to do, but people were swarming him, people were packing around him. And so he's drawing this large crowd. And this time, too, this was right before Passover. And now Passover, we talk about that a lot of times when we take communion, because it was this big festival commemorating the last plague in Egypt, and the angel of death passed over the Israelites who had the blood over the door, and so there was all this symbolism and stuff there. But they're about to celebrate that, so everyone's heading to Jerusalem to celebrate this. And if you think of it, it's kind of like Thanksgiving, because we're near Thanksgiving, right? That's this week, right? I know I'm sick, but I'm not that sick. It's this week, right? Someone, can I get it? Okay, but there'd be a lot of people kind of going for the big festival, so it's like even maybe a bigger crowd than normal. Everyone's traveling, and there's this guy named Bartimaeus. Now, those of you who like kind of the meaning of names, names are kind of funny things because if you've heard the name Bartimaeus, you probably don't think about it. But Bar means, in Aramaic, it means son. So Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus. So that's his name. That's why. But he's the son of Timaeus, which it's not that interesting, but it is because Mark generally doesn't name the people that get healed. And then not a lot of them have names, so you start wondering, is this guy later known to the church? What is, and so. And this story, too, it's interesting. I kind of want to take a sidestep for, Matthew mentions there were two guys. Mark mentions one. And some people are like, oh, well, see, there's a Bible contradiction. Well, it's not really. It's perspective. When you tell a story, you tell it with a certain perspective. If I said, John and I had burritos at Bible study yesterday, which he made, and they're very, very good, and I ate the last one for breakfast, the leftovers. Is that true? But if I said John, Bob, and I had burritos, is that true? Yeah, well, it was. Point being, sometimes when people tell a story from different perspectives, you emphasize different details. So that's just a freebie for comparing it to Matthew if you want. And it says, he was sitting by the roadside. Now, this is sort of a strategic place to sit. Because, I have friends who do busking, like you go and you play the guitar and try to get people to give you money and everything. You're probably not going to busk outside of our building on a Thursday because there's really not much going on over here on a Thursday. You'd probably, if you were going to busk and try to make money, you go to Rehoboth on the beach, everyone's there, they've got cash, they feel generous, or maybe you go downtown someplace near the restaurants and things. And so that's he's out there, and because this is a a big trade route, so to speak, so lots of people would be going along there. And then again, it's holiday time, so more people. And when you're going on a religious pilgrimage to something like Passover, you feel a little more generous, right? It's the godly thing to do. I'll drop a buck in the blind guy's cup, or that's kind of how you picture it because of our culture. A cup and a cane. I don't know what he had. But so he's sitting there, and he's it's kind of like downtown, outside of lunch spots, or when we were downtown, we had lots of people asking for money. And I'd always tell them, you can't do it at church though. That's my job, because hallelujah, amen. Pass the plate around. Don't cut in on my business. Verse 47 says, when he had heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And so Son of David, now who was David? King David. Someone said King David. 10 section. We're not just getting an amen, we're getting an answer. And so King David, if you remember the stories, there's a lot of stories about David, some of them good, some of them bad, but we'll go over the good ones. David, when he was, this guy named Goliath, he's a big dude, and, nobody would fight him. David gets a slingshot, which is kind of the kind you whip around your head, and boom, knocks him in the head, kills him, cuts his head off, and brings it around, because that part's not in your Sunday school lesson. And so he defeats he becomes what's arguably the greatest king of Israel, and people still, I messed up one time. I was taking Hebrew from she could best be described as, it was in Pittsburgh, an Israeli drill sergeant. She was very, very tough, and, they like to teach you by immersion now in languages. That's great, except I didn't understand anything, because everyone else in the class, except one of my other friend, Craig, was Jewish, and so they had a little bit more background than we did. So we were a little lost. We quickly found each other and became really good friends. But I remember, she's like, is David king in Israel? And I'm like, no, because I'm thinking he's dead, right? That's not the right answer. The answer is, yes, David is king, because he still thought of king in Israel. And out of these expectations of the Messiah, one of them is that he would be the son of David. And so when Bart's yelling out son of David, he's not just kind of throwing out something like you're descended from some random dude, and not just you're descended from King David, but he's pointing to say, hey, I believe you are somebody more than just a guy going around healing people. I believe you are the Messiah. It's not just a bland title. Like people don't come to me. You're son of Clarence. That would mean nothing to anyone except you're son of Pat. My dad goes by either. That's a long story too. But he's proclaiming who he is. He's proclaiming what he believes. And you wonder, has he heard the stories? Has he heard the stories about people being healed? Maybe he even heard the story of he opened the eyes of a blind guy. But many people then are rebuking him. The crowd around is kind of like, don't hassle Jesus. Jesus doesn't need your panhandling. Jesus doesn't need, what you got going on there. You kind of picture, if you've ever been in a big city where there's important people, and generally they wear suits. I don't know why important people wear suits. When I wear a suit, I feel important, but it's usually for weddings and funerals, so I also feel sad. Not at the weddings, but just the funerals. That's awkward. But you kind of picture, like an important person on DC, and I always picture the crowd acting like the Secret Service guys. They're like, no, don't hassle Jesus. Go ask. They're thinking maybe he's just going to ask him for money. Apparently the disciples have learned at this point, not to push people away from him, because when they did it last time with the kids, they kind of got chewed out a little bit. So the crowd kind of takes over for it here. It's funny because in Bethsaida, the people are bringing the blind guy to him. We read that. Here they're the crowd is keeping him away. And so Paul just figured, this guy, he doesn't deserve Jesus' time. Kind of like the disciples with the kids. They were like, these kids don't deserve Jesus' time. The crowd's kind of doing the same thing with Bart. They're like, hey, you don't deserve Jesus' time. It's kind of, there's, again, back with the name, his name would mean son of Timaeus, but, like, what's Timaeus mean? Timaeus means honor, so it's like the son of honor. There's sort of an ironic, he's the son of honor, but he has no honor, because people they don't care about him. He's just this guy in the crowd, off to the side, asking for money. It's interesting. There's a lot of interesting little things in this story. This is one of those stories that makes me think, because there's all these parallels and things you think. The rich young ruler, like, nobody stopped the rich young ruler for coming up to Jesus. Why? Because he was rich, he had money, he was balling. And so, he had everything going on. They don't stop him, Was blind Bart on the side of the road? Get out of here. Bart's kind of at the bottom of the food chain. It says, I love it here, though. He cried out all the more. He was just like not taking no for an answer. And I couldn't think of a good movie scene or anything to go with this, but nothing was going to silence him. And a lot of times, some of the people we see show up to talk to Jesus are people who are desperate. They got nothing else going on. There's no other medical treatment for him. And it reminds me of Jairus. We talked about his daughter was sick, and he was a synagogue ruler. If you remember this, I'm trying to remember. You guys remember anything we've talked about in Mark? Please. Okay, good. Some of the sermons worked. But Jairus, whose daughter was sick, he kind of puts his position in jeopardy when he comes to Jesus, because, people weren't all down with Jesus, but he's desperate because his daughter was sick. And, we read in that same kind of passage, there's this woman who she's been bleeding for 12 years, and she comes out and reaches out and grabs his garment. That's desperate, right? Because, she could have gotten in a little bit of trouble. She was unclean. She's reaching out for him. And so there's, and I love the beginning of Mark, because, like, the paralytic through the roof, that's desperate, right? When you're, and I wanted to do it here, but we got this really nice ceiling. I wanted to cut a hole. If this had been drywall, I was going to have people during the sermon cut a hole in the roof, because they cut a hole in the roof, they lower the dude down in the front of Jesus while he's preaching because they couldn't get in the house. Like, that's pretty desperate. And so maybe these stories have circulated, maybe Bart knows, we don't exactly know, but, he was just like, he's not taking no for an answer. He's like, no, I wanted, this is my shot. I got one shot. One shot. Some of you know where I was going with that. And so, it says, and Jesus stopped and said, call him. And they call the blind man, saying to him, take heart, get up, he's calling you. And, it's funny because they say call him. They don't have to say which guy. They're like, we all know. It's the dude yelling. It's this Bart guy who's shouting. Everyone knows who he's talking about. No one is too insignificant to Jesus to command his attention. Like the leper, someone who had skin disease, they call out to Jesus. Jesus there. Women with hemorrhage, little children, the blind beggar. They all receive Jesus' care. And so it just shows how much Jesus cares about everybody. There's no reason to care about Bart socially, right? He was just this guy. But Jesus reaches out. It's kind of a funny picture if you think about this. Here's the crowd. And they're all like, shut up, shut up, shut up, well, shut up, Jesus is too busy, important for you. And then, oh, wait, what? Well, as I was saying, get up, Jesus wants to see you. They kind of have to turn around. They go from shut up to get up. And, it's funny to me because that's kind of how fickle crowds go, too. We're gonna see that little foreshadowing for what happens after this. And then it says, and throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said to him, Rabbi, let me recover my sight. And Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. It's kind of, you picture, like, you ever watch The Price is Right? Maybe because I'm sick and I'm thinking about it. Like, usually Price is Right is something you watch when we were my age, because it was in our day, they didn't have like cartoon channels and stuff, and so you'd watch like The Price is Right. And what happens on The Price is Right when someone's name gets called? The camera pans out to the crowd. They find the person, and they're running down. People are high-fiving them, like, hey, it's your turn. That's kind of how I picture this. Bart's running down. He's running through the crowd because, he's blind. I don't know how they're getting him there. I don't know if he's got that cane of whipping or whatever, how it happes. And so, he's getting down there. They go, you're next contestant on. Jesus will heal you. Bartimaeus, you're the next person. The Savior is here. It's interesting because, there's this little detail that Mark includes. He throws off his cloak. Now, before you get thinking something, it's not that he's naked, but your cloak was sort of, that was what kept you warm at night, and it was probably all the value he had. It was all he had. Now, Exodus 22 says, if you ever take your neighbor's cloak and pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for this is only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. What else shall he sleep? This is like your sleeping bag, your combo thing. And so he takes everything he has, he flips it off, and he starts running to Jesus. And I like this because he says, what do you want me to do for you? It says, he's throwing off his sprang on the King Jesus. Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? Which, doesn't it seem fairly obvious here? But it's like Jesus kind of gives him an opportunity to, it's like, well, it's my ankle, Lord. What do you want me to do for you? It says, the blind man said, Rabbi, I want to recover my sight. And Jesus says, go your way, your faith has made you well. Immediately he recovered his sight and followed him along the way. And so it's this crazy kind of cool story where he goes from, he's blind, and Jesus heals him on the spot. And then, he goes from helpless to restored. He goes from sitting along the roadside to following him. And ultimately he chooses what's best, which is following Jesus. And, the interesting thing about this story, it confirms again who Jesus is. It reveals he is the true Son of David. He's here for the world. You have John 3:16, which we read earlier. We're talking about the Pittsburgh thing. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever should believe in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And Jesus continually said, he came to seek, he came to serve, he came not to be served but to serve. And so we see here this picture of Jesus continually putting into practice serving the least of these, serving beggars. He was here to heal. He's here to show mercy on the outcast. He's not here to round up recruits for a revolution. There's different ideas about what the Messiah is going to be at this time. And some people are looking for this military leader to come and take over. He's not that. Some are looking, for him to kind of have power and control over everything, like James and John. They're kind of thinking, I want to be right and left because, you're coming into your power. But that's not why he came. He came to seek and save the lost. And he continually shows mercy on the outcast. And ultimately he came so that we can have this restored relationship with God. Now, did you notice that Bart asked the same question that he asked James and John earlier? Jesus asked the same question, what do you want me to do for you? It's the same exact question, right? Very different answers, though, right? Or, James and John, I remember we talked about them very recently, to give you a hint. What did they want? Position. They want position. Being left and right. And of course, being the left and the right where Jesus is going is not quite what you're thinking, because he's going on a cross, and there's going to be a guy on his left and on his right. But Bart gives the answers the disciples should have given, in a sense. He says, I want to see. The disciples should have asked to see spiritually, because they're missing out on so many of the things that Jesus came for. They're missing out on why he came. They're missing out on his purpose in what he's doing. There's irony. The disciples are constantly blind to Jesus, but the blind guy can't see Jesus but gets him. The blind guy is the least blind guy in the story. The crowd doesn't get Jesus' purpose to come for even those who are in the margins. The disciples don't seem to get it along the way most of the time. Jesus constantly would tell them, hey, you don't get it. The blind guy's the least blind guy because he understands who Jesus is. He comes to him and he gets what he asks for, and ultimately then he gets to follow Jesus. And, I was thinking about that this week because we often want things that aren't good for us. And I was thinking back with James and John too, don't we? James and John, they want to be on the left and the right. Those are not going to be good positions here in Jerusalem. There's going to be two people crucified on the left and on the right. And, they wanted power and position, but Jesus came for humility, not to be served, but to serve others. And ultimately, God's plans are better than ours. But we often tend to want to make our own way. We're impatient, right? I got to give credit for this story to Josh. He pointed it out, and I thought it was spot on. So Josh and I went hunting, which is probably why I'm sick. But we went hunting, and some of you aren't hunters, sorry, but we walked out, and I had to put him in a stand that. Because there's a lot of flooding right now in different areas. Some of you can come up through your basements and things, and there's just a lot of water in the fields. And so I had to bring him to the stand, and we had to walk down the road instead of going the other way because it was so flooded. And then if the stand was right here, I walked around this way to walk him in, and I got him up in the stand. And then he doesn't have cell phone reception up there, so I just put my son give him a loaded shotgun, put him somewhere, and if I hear shots, I'll come. And anyway, it's always a weird time for a father. And so I put him up at the stand, and then I go out, and everything's really flooded. And so I can't get back to my stand the way I wanted to, and so I had to walk out another way. But again, Josh doesn't have cell phone reception, so he doesn't come in because I told him to wait for me. I get these texts later when we finally get reception. Dad? Because I left him out there over an hour after hunting time was done. And so he's up in the stand, and I had to walk out another way, and it's like I was trying to yell to him, but he couldn't hear me. And again, he doesn't have cell phone reception. So I get in the car, and I drive down the road, and no, I didn't leave him, don't worry. Anyway, so I finally get to him. And he's straight. I parked right across from him. I could see his light in the stand. I was yelling. I said, "Josh, Dad!" I said, "Can you come out on your own?" Because I didn't want to walk back through the thing. Be honest, I was tired, and we didn't see anything. And so I was like, "Walk out the way we came in." And so Josh was like, because he's a 15-year-old boy, it's like, I don't need to walk in the way we came. I could just walk straight to Dad. And that's what he did. He looked like he was in Vietnam because he had his rifle above, because straight out meant he was very deep in water. And I think it may have come up to his waist at some point. It was definitely up over his knees, and he was very, very wet. The reason I wanted him to walk the other way is because you can stay fairly dry, and there's only a few inches of water here and there that you have to step in. But if you walk out the straight way, you're just basically walking through a pond. And here's the point is, if he'd followed my instructions, it may or may not have been any longer, but it definitely would have been an easier road to get where you're going. And that's how life is with God. Sometimes we don't follow his instructions because we think, man, this way looks good. This is shorter. This is better. I know my Father's calling me to go this way, but I'm going this way. And that's what happens. And we go the wrong way. God has plans and purpose for your life. And John 10:10, I read that verse all the time. I love it. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that I may have life and have it to the full. God has plans and purpose for your life. And if you trust him and seek him, if you come to him in humility, he'll bring you to the places you need to be. Bartimaeus, you can't get much more humble. He was low on the social status. But he just kept crying out to Jesus till he annoyed somebody enough that Jesus heard him. And Jesus grants him what he wants. And then he's given position. He becomes a follower and a person who follows Jesus. I don't know what happens to Bart after that. I kind of wonder, because they name him, which is so unusual, I kind of wonder if he was known to the early church, to become a leader in the early church. I don't know. But God had a plan and a purpose for him. And if we truly seek God in humility, he gives us this new and better way to live. I often, it's hard in life if we're honest, because I think sometimes we want stuff, and we go to God with a list. I want this, I want this, I want this. That's not all bad. You can tell God your desires. But at the end, can you pray, but not my will, but yours be done? See, that's the problem. I want. It's harder to pray that, but not my will, but yours be done. That's what we see with the disciples. They constantly want position and power when the way is humility and service. This would be just my challenge to you. He'll give you what you need to live fully for him if you can humbly submit yourself to following. As the worship team comes back,